Clara had never liked fancy places. To her, they felt like a world she wasn't allowed to enter. A place of soft lights and quiet music where people in expensive clothes pretended not to see the workers who cleaned up their messes. But that evening, she had no choice. Her cleaning job had sent her here, to one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. She was poor, tired, and carrying the weight of 1,000 problems, but she kept her head down and focused on her work. Wiping tables, collecting empty plates, reminding herself that every single dollar mattered. As she moved toward the back, near the hum and heat of the kitchen, she noticed him. A young man in a simple waiter's uniform, standing alone. He was carefully arranging glasses on a tray, his movements slow and deliberate, as if each piece of glass was a priceless treasure. His name tag said Michael. Unlike the other waiters who rushed around with stressed expressions, complaining under their breath, he was calm. There was something quiet and respectful about him that made Clara pause. He didn't seem to belong here, yet he fit in perfectly. Suddenly, a harsh voice cut through the air. The restaurant manager was shouting, his face red and twisted with anger. He was yelling at Michael, blaming him for a small, insignificant misplaced order that didn't even seem real. The manager's voice was a whip, and everyone nearby fell silent, afraid to draw his attention. Clara felt her chest tighten with a familiar, sickening feeling of injustice. She watched as Michael lowered his eyes, his shoulders slumping slightly. He just quietly said, "I'm sorry, sir," even though it was clear to anyone watching that he had done nothing wrong. Something inside Clara snapped. Before she could stop herself, she spoke up. Her voice trembled, but it was clear and honest. "It wasn't his fault," she said, looking at the manager. "He's been working hard all night. It's not fair to blame him." The manager's head whipped around, his eyes narrowing on her. He stared at her with pure fury, his voice low and threatening. "You're the cleaner. Stay in your place," he warned her, his words dripping with contempt. Clara's heart pounded, but she didn't look away. And then, she saw it. Michael looked up at her, and for a split second, his eyes met hers. He didn't say a word, but the look he gave her was filled with a gentle, silent thank you. It was a look that made her heart feel strangely warm, a small spark in the cold, lonely night. Later, as the restaurant slowly emptied and the last of the wealthy patrons drifted out, Clara found herself working near Michael again. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft. No one had asked her that in a very, very long time. The simple question almost made her want to cry. They started talking, their voices low as they worked side by side. It began with small things, the long hours, the ache in their feet. Then, somehow, Clara found herself opening up. She told him about her sick mother, about the medical bills that piled up like mountains she could never climb. She spoke of her constant fear, the anxiety that lived in her chest, the fear of losing everything she had, which wasn't much to begin with. She even told him about her small, secret dream of one day living a life without that fear, a life where she could just breathe. Through it all, Michael listened. He really listened, his eyes never leaving her face. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty advice. And most importantly, he didn't judge. His quiet attention was a gift she hadn't realized how much she needed. When she finished, a little embarrassed by how much she'd shared, she asked about his life. "What about you?" A light, almost sad smile touched his lips. "I'm just a simple waiter," he said, trying to understand people. His answer felt incomplete, like a story with the most important pages torn out. But there was something in his eyes that told her not to push, so she let it go. As the night drew to a close, Clara started noticing strange things, little details that didn't add up. She saw how other staff members treated Michael. It wasn't just friendship. It was a strange mix of deep respect and a subtle fear. They spoke to him carefully, almost formally. At one point, she saw the actual owner of the restaurant, a man famous for his arrogance and wealth walk. He paused, caught Michael's eye, and gave him a polite, deferential nod. A nod you would give to a superior, not to a waiter. It made no sense. Clara felt a dizzying wave of confusion. She must be imagining things, she told herself. She was just tired. It was almost closing time. The floors had just been mopped, and a patch near the kitchen entrance was still slick and wet. As Clara hurried past, her worn-out shoes slipped. She gasped, her arms flailing as she started to fall backward. But she never hit the ground. Strong arms wrapped around her waist, catching her just in time. It was Michael. For a breathless moment, they stood there, frozen. His hand was warm against her back, and she was pressed against his chest. The clatter of the kitchen and the distant city noise faded into nothing. In that instant, held securely in his arms, Clara felt a profound sense of safety, a feeling so foreign and so powerful it stole her breath. Just as quickly as it happened, it was over. Michael gently helped her stand upright and then took a hurried step back, as if he'd been burned. A flicker of something, was it fear, crossed his face. "Good night, Clara," he said softly, his voice a little strained. Before she could find her own voice to reply, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the empty restaurant. Clara finished her work in a daze and stepped out into the cool night air. Her heart was a mess of tangled emotions and unanswered questions. Who was Michael, really? Why would a simple waiter accept insults so calmly, yet command the respect of the owner himself? She looked back at the glowing lights of the restaurant, a world that had felt so alien just a few hours ago. Now, it held a mystery she felt drawn to, a puzzle centered around the quiet waiter, who was clearly not a waiter at all. Clara didn't know it then, but this night was not an ending. It was the beginning of everything. The start of a love that would challenge her heart, shatter her fears, and change her life forever. And it all started with a secret that was already standing right in front of her. The next evening, Clara walked back into the restaurant, her steps just as heavy with fatigue as the day before. But something inside her felt different. A strange lightness mixed with a nervous flutter. Before she even consciously admitted it to herself, her eyes were already scanning the bustling room, searching for him, searching for Michael. She quickly dismissed the thought, telling herself it was just simple curiosity, nothing more. But the moment her gaze landed on him near the kitchen door, dressed in that same plain uniform, with that same unreadable calm expression, her heart gave a little lurch. It beat faster, a rhythm she wasn't used to. As if he could feel her stare, Michael looked up. Their eyes met across the chaotic dining room, and he offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was polite, brief, but it was enough. That smile stayed with Clara, a tiny flicker of warmth, as she began her shift. Throughout the long, demanding night, their paths seemed to cross more than usual. A quick exchange of plates at the service station, a shared moment, refilling water glasses, a brief, silent look that felt surprisingly warm, almost familiar. It was like they were two dancers in a chaotic ballet, finding moments of quiet connection amidst the noise. During one of these fleeting encounters, Michael leaned in slightly and asked in a low voice, "Is your mother feeling any better?" Clara stopped, genuinely surprised. He remembered he had listened to her frantic, tired words from the night before, and actually remembered she felt a wave of something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt seen. A small, genuine smile touched her lips as she nodded. "Yes, a little. Thank you for asking, Michael." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Later, during a rare, shared 10-minute break, they found themselves on the cool concrete steps behind the restaurant, hidden from the bright lights and the endless clatter. The city air was thick, but out here, it felt like they could finally breathe. Clara, feeling an uncharacteristic urge to share, started talking. She spoke about her childhood, about growing up with so little that every penny was a victory. She talked about having to become strong long before she was ready. About the weight of responsibilities she carried for her family. Michael just listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty platitudes. He just listened, his gaze steady, as if every word she spoke held immense importance. When she finally fell silent, a little embarrassed by her own vulnerability, he began to speak. His voice was quiet, measured. He spoke carefully, choosing his words with a precision that seemed out of place for a simple waiter. He said that life had taught him that money and power were often just masks, hiding the true nature of people's hearts. He talked about how the simplest acts of kindness often held the most profound meaning. His words were deep, philosophical, and Clara's curiosity sparked again. Who was this man, really? Their quiet moment was shattered when the restaurant manager, a man with a perpetually sour expression, stormed out the back door. He jabbed a finger at Michael, his voice sharp and condescending. "Michael, stop lazing around. The grease trap in the main kitchen needs to be cleaned out. Now." It was an unfair, demeaning task, clearly meant to punish Michael for something, though Clara couldn't imagine what. To her surprise, Michael simply nodded calmly. "Of course, sir." He stood up without a word of protest. The surge of anger rose in Clara. She watched him walk away and then turned to the steps where he had sat. After the manager had disappeared back inside, she found Michael by the kitchen. "Why do you let him treat you like that?" she whispered, her voice tight with frustration. "You didn't do anything wrong." Michael turned to her, and the gentle smile was back on his face, a stark contrast to the injustice he had just faced. "Some battles, Clara," he said softly, "are won with patience, not with anger." His simple, profound answer echoed in her mind long after he had disappeared into the kitchen to perform the thankless task. Later that night, the restaurant was at its peak chaos when a wealthy, impeccably dressed woman at one of Clara's tables began complaining loudly. She accused Clara of being slow, of spilling a drop of water, of being careless and clumsy. The accusations grew louder, more personal, deliberately embarrassing her in front of the other diners. Clara felt her face burn with shame, and hot tears pricked the back of her eyes. She stood frozen, speechless, the humiliation washing over her. But before she could even stammer an apology, Michael was there. He stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Clara. His posture was respectful, but his voice, when he spoke, was filled with a quiet authority that stunned the entire room into silence. "Ma'am," he said calmly, his tone even but firm. "I personally saw the waitress attend to your table with the utmost care. Perhaps in the hustle of a busy evening, there was a small misunderstanding." He corrected the customer's complaints with facts, his confidence unwavering, his respect for both the customer and Clara perfectly balanced. The room was silent. The entitled customer, clearly taken aback by this waiter's audacity and eloquence, faltered. She mumbled something under her breath and backed down, utterly disarmed. The manager, who had been rushing over, stopped in his tracks, his face a mixture of nervousness and shock. He said nothing. Clara just stared at Michael, her mind reeling with confusion and a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude. A waiter had no right to speak like that, to command a room with such quiet power, yet he had. For her, after the customer had paid and left in a huff, Michael turned to Clara. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble for you." Clara shook her head, finding her voice. "Trouble? Michael? No one has ever stood up for me like that, ever." Their eyes met, and in that moment, a connection that had been quietly building all night solidified into something stronger, something real. As the night wound down and the last of the staff were cleaning up, Clara saw him again. This time, he was standing in a quiet corner with the restaurant owner, the real owner, not the manager. Their conversation looked serious, intense. They weren't speaking like an owner and an employee, they were speaking like equals. When Michael glanced up and saw her watching, his expression shifted. He quickly ended the conversation and walked away, deliberately avoiding her eyes. That small act, that sudden distance, hurt Clara more than she wanted to admit. On the long, lonely bus ride home, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Michael, brave, intelligent, and so very different. But he was also a man wrapped in secrets, a puzzle she couldn't begin to solve. She felt a powerful pull towards him, but a voice of caution whispered in her ear. Was caring for him a mistake? Would getting close to someone with so many walls only lead to more pain? She was lost in her thoughts when her phone buzzed, vibrating against her hand. A message from an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the simple text. "Did you reach home safely, Michael?" A soft smile touched her lips, chasing away the doubts. Her fingers moved quickly, typing back a simple yes. Her heart was already stepping into something new, something she didn't understand. She didn't know it yet, but with every text, every shared glance, every secret revealed, she was stepping closer to a truth that could either shatter this fragile, beautiful connection, or transform it into the greatest love she had ever. Clara kept telling herself that Michael was just a kind coworker, a friend, nothing more. But every day, her thoughts drifted back to him, especially in those quiet, lonely moments when the weight of life felt a little too heavy. At the restaurant where they both worked, a silent connection began to grow between them. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping promises, just small, simple actions that slowly, carefully, built a foundation of trust. When Michael noticed Clara's hands trembling from pure exhaustion, he'd quietly place a cup of hot coffee beside her. When Clara knew, he'd skipped his break again to help out during a rush. She'd save him a plate of food, keeping it warm in the back. They found comfort in soft laughter over silly jokes, and even in the long, comfortable silences that settled between them. Silences that never felt awkward, only peaceful. Slowly but surely, Clara began to realize something profound. She didn't care about Michael's social standing or how much money he had. What she cared about was the way he listened, truly listened. When she spoke, she cared about the respect he showed her, not just as a coworker, but as a person. Most of all, she cared about the sense of safety she felt whenever he was near. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time. One quiet evening, during a lull in service, Clara found herself opening up to him. She admitted, in a hushed voice, that wealthy people intimidated her. She explained how she'd often felt looked down upon by those who had more, treated as if she were invisible. Michael's expression shifted subtly. He glanced away for a moment, his gaze distant, before he spoke. "Not all rich people are heartless," he said quietly, "but many of them hide behind their power. It's a shield to protect their own fears." His words felt strangely personal, as if they were pulled from a deep well of experience. Meanwhile, Michael was fighting his own internal battle. He knew he shouldn't be getting close to anyone, not while he was living under a false identity. But Clara saw, Honesty and quiet strength had managed to touch a part of his heart he thought he'd locked away for good. He was drawn to her in a way that scared him. He desperately wanted to tell her the truth, to confess everything. But the fear of her reaction held him back. He was terrified that the moment she knew who he really was, the trust and warmth in her eyes would turn to disappointment or worse, resentment. He couldn't bear the thought of her looking at him differently. Later that same night, Clara caught Michael watching her from across the nearly empty restaurant. His expression was a storm of conflicting emotions, sadness, longing, and something she couldn't quite name. She walked over and gently asked if something was wrong. He just smiled, a faint, tired smile, and said he was just tired. But his eyes told a different story. A little while later, as Clara was cleaning up near the office, she overheard the manager's angry, hushed voice on the phone. "I don't know what to do," the manager complained. "The owner's son is making things incredibly difficult down here." Clara froze, the cleaning cloth dropping from her hand. The owner's son. The words echoed in her mind, each one a hammer blow against her heart. Her pulse began to race. It couldn't be. She spun around, her eyes frantically searching the room for Michael. But he was gone. He had vanished. For the rest of her shift, Clara worked in a daze. A tempest of thoughts raged inside her. Had she misunderstood? Was it just a coincidence? Or was the man she was falling for, the quiet, kind, and seemingly simple waiter, hiding a secret so immense it could shatter everything? As she finally clocked out and stepped into the cool night air, she saw him. Michael was standing outside, alone, leaning against the brick wall. His face was serious, his posture distant. He looked like a stranger. For a fleeting moment, she wanted to march right up to him and demand answers, to ask him everything that was screaming in her mind. But fear paralyzed her. The fear of what she might hear. They said goodnight to each other with a forced casualness, as if nothing was wrong. But the air between them was thick and heavy with the unspoken question that hung over them both. As Clara walked home, her heart trembling with every step, she was completely unaware that fate had already set its course. Love had chosen its path, and the truth she so deeply feared was drawing closer, ready to put everything she believed about trust, honesty, and the quiet waiter named Michael to the ultimate test. The next few days were thick with an unspoken tension, a strange new electricity in the air between me and Michael, even though neither of us dared to bring it up. The words I'd overheard about him being more than just a waiter played on a loop in my mind. I tried to act normal, to go about my shifts as if nothing had changed, but it was impossible. My world had tilted on its axis, and Michael was at the center of it. I started watching him differently, more closely. It was like seeing him for the first time, all over again. I noticed the way people, both staff and customers, would unconsciously lean in when he spoke, their attention captured by his quiet authority. I saw how problems, big and small, just seemed to evaporate when he was around. A double-booked table. Michael would smooth it over with a calm word and a charming smile. A kitchen mishap? He'd have a solution before anyone else could panic. Even the manager, a man who seemed to run on a fuel of stress and anger, treated Michael with a new kind of deference. The usual shouting and impatience had been replaced by something that looked a lot like fear. It was subtle, a quick glance, a hesitation before giving an order, but it was there, and it sent a shiver down my spine. Who was this man I was falling for? The more I observed, the less I understood, and the more my heart ached with a confusing mix of love and apprehension. One evening, the restaurant was a chaotic storm of activity. A large party of wealthy business people had booked the main dining area to celebrate a massive deal. The air buzzed with their loud laughter and the clinking of expensive champagne glasses. The manager was a nervous wreck, pacing the floor, barking orders, his face slick with sweat. He was desperate for everything to be perfect, and his anxiety was making everyone else's job 10 times harder. During the peak of the dinner rush, as I was navigating a tight space between tables, a man from the big party stood up abruptly, not looking where he was going. He bumped straight into me, and his glass of red wine sloshed all over my clean white uniform. Before I could even gasp, he spun around, his face a mask of rage. "Look what you've done, you clumsy girl," he roared, his voice cutting through the restaurant's buzz. "This is a custom-tailored suit. You've ruined my night." Every head in the room turned. The music seemed to fade away. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, hot and judgmental. My face burned with a deep, consuming shame. I felt so small, so utterly humiliated, like a bug under a microscope. I opened my mouth to apologize, to say it was an accident, but he wasn't finished. "I want her fired," he bellowed, pointing a thick finger at me. "Right now. I won't have my celebration ruined by incompetent staff." The manager, who had scurried over, looked from the furious customer to my wine-stained uniform. I saw the calculation in his eyes, the familiar instinct to appease the wealthy guest at all costs. He turned to me, his expression hardening, ready to throw me under the bus. My heart sank. This was it. I was going to lose my job over a spilled drink. But then, a voice cut through the silence. Calm, steady, and firm. That won't be necessary. It was Michael. He had stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of me, a protective shield. It was an accident, he continued, his eyes fixed on the customer. And I can assure you, disrespect towards our staff will not be tolerated here. The room was utterly silent. The customer let out a short, incredulous laugh. And who are you? He sneered. Just another waiter. Get out of my way before I have you fired, too. But Michael didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just stood his ground, looking the man directly in the eye. His presence seemed to expand, filling the space around him. It was no longer the charming, easygoing waiter I knew. This was someone else, someone powerful. The confident smile was gone, replaced by an unyielding and almost dangerous intensity. Something in that direct, unwavering gaze made the customer falter. His mocking smile vanished. He shifted uncomfortably on his feet. The manager's face had gone ghost white, his eyes wide with what looked like sheer terror. A strange energy rippled through the room. Everyone sensed that this was more than just a simple confrontation. This was a power play, and the waiter was somehow winning. Finally, after a long, tense moment, the customer broke eye contact. He muttered a curse under his breath, gave Michael one last hateful glare, and stormed out of the restaurant, his party scrambling to follow him. The spell was broken. The room slowly came back to life with hushed whispers. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, completely stunned by Michael's courage. He had defended me when no one else would have. Thank you, I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. I looked up at him, my eyes swimming with unshed tears. But the man who looked back at me was a stranger. The warmth was gone, replaced by a troubled, distant expression. He looked like he knew he had just made a terrible mistake, crossing a line he had fought so hard to keep hidden. Later that night, after the restaurant had emptied, I saw the manager pull Michael into his office. The door was closed, but I could hear the manager's low, angry voice, hissing words like consequences, and you promised. My heart twisted with worry. What was happening? What had Michael done? When Michael finally came out, his face was a grim mask. The light in his eyes had been extinguished. He walked over to me, avoiding my gaze. You should go home early, Clara, he said. His tone was gentle, but it was the gentleness of a stranger. It was distant, pushing me away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab his arm and demand the truth. Are you just a waiter? Who are you? Well, the words caught in my throat. Fear and a wave of exhaustion held me back. So I just nodded numbly, grabbed my things, and walked out into the cold night air. As I left, I felt a sharp, deep pain in my chest, the kind of ache that comes when love and doubt collide with such force that you feel like you might break. I glanced back one last time. Through the glass, I could see Michael standing alone under the dim restaurant lights, a solitary figure in a world he no longer seemed to belong to. And I knew, with a terrible certainty, that the secret walls he had built around himself were finally crumbling. The next step, whatever it was, would change everything, forever. The next evening, Clara arrived at the restaurant, her heart feeling like a lead weight in her chest. She wasn't sure what she was walking into, but she knew one thing. She had to keep her distance from Michael, at least until she could sort out the storm of thoughts in her mind. As she stepped inside, a strange quietness hung in the air. It was much quieter than a typical bustling evening. She saw the staff whispering in hushed tones, their faces a mix of nervousness and anticipation, like the air before a thunderstorm. Something big was about to happen. She could feel it in her bones. Clara tried her best to avoid looking towards the kitchen, towards him. But her eyes, as if having a will of their own, eventually drifted in that direction. And there he was. Michael. He wasn't in his usual waiter's uniform. Instead, he was dressed neatly, looking sharp and put together. His expression was serious, almost unreadable, and it sent a shiver down her spine. Before she had a chance to look away, to pretend she hadn't seen him, the restaurant owner walked in, accompanied by several people in expensive-looking suits. The manager rushed forward to greet them. A nervous, almost forced, smile plastered on his face. Suddenly, everything stopped. The clatter of plates, the hum of conversations, the busy rhythm of the restaurant all ceased. The owner raised his hand, gesturing for everyone's attention. He announced that there would be an important meeting in the main hall, right now. Clara felt her hands start to tremble as she was swept along with the rest of the staff, her heart pounding against her ribs. They all gathered, a sea of confused and anxious faces. The owner stood at the front of the room, his voice clear and commanding as he began to speak. He explained that for the past few months, He had been conducting a sort of test, an evaluation of the restaurant and its staff, and he had done so by working closely alongside them through his son. A collective murmur went through the crowd. Then, the owner turned towards Michael. He placed a firm, proud hand on Michael's shoulder. And then came the words that shattered Clara's world. The owner announced that Michael was not a waiter. He was the true heir to the entire restaurant chain. Not just that, but he was also a successful businessman in his own right, managing several other ventures. A wave of gasps rippled through the room. Clara felt the floor drop out from under her. It was as if the world had tilted on its axis. A loud ringing filled her ears, drowning out everything else. Her eyes were locked on Michael. He was standing there, tall and confident, a complete stranger. The shy, gentle waiter she thought she knew was gone. In his place was this powerful, poised man who had been hiding in plain sight. A flood of memories washed over her, overwhelming her. Every quiet conversation they'd shared, every kind gesture he'd made, every secretive moment that now made a terrible, painful kind of sense. It all replayed in her mind, but now it was tainted, twisted. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. She felt a profound sense of betrayal. It wasn't about the money. She couldn't care less that he was rich. It was the lie, the elaborate, calculated deception. He had pretended to be someone he wasn't, and she had fallen for it completely. She had opened her heart to a fabrication. Michael's eyes desperately searched the crowd, and when they finally found hers, they were filled with a deep, unmistakable regret. He looked like he wanted to say something, to explain, but it was too late. Clara couldn't bear to look at him for a second longer. She turned away, her heart shattering into a million pieces. Without a single word, she walked out of the restaurant. Each step away from him, away from that room full of lies, felt like a physical blow. The cold night air hit her face as she stepped outside, but it did nothing to numb the searing pain inside her. She was consumed by one agonizing question. Was any of it real? Was the connection she felt, the love that had started to bloom in her heart, just another part of his test? Back inside the restaurant, Michael stood frozen, watching the woman he loved walk out of his life. He watched her disappear into the darkness, and in that moment, he realized the devastating truth. The secret he had been so afraid to reveal had finally come out. And in doing so, it had cost him the one and only thing that truly mattered. He had won his inheritance, but he had lost her. But the familiar rhythm of her life was gone. Nothing felt the same. The quiet moments, once a source of peace, were now filled with echoes of Michael. His calm voice, his kind eyes, the gentle way he made her feel seen and safe. The memories were a constant, painful reminder of what she thought she had. At night, when the city outside was asleep, she would cry silently into her pillow. It wasn't about the money. She cried because he hadn't trusted her, because he hadn't believed she was strong enough to handle the truth. The lie was a chasm between them, and she didn't know if she could ever cross it. Meanwhile, Michael was adrift in a way he had never been before. For the first time in his life, his immense wealth, his power, his hard-won success felt utterly meaningless. They were like ashes in his hands. He stopped attending board meetings, canceled appointments, and avoided his family, especially his father. His father tried to justify his actions, explaining that the test had been necessary, a way to protect the family from fortune hunters. But Michael felt nothing but a hollow emptiness inside. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the real mistake wasn't hiding his money, it was hiding his heart. He replayed every single moment he had shared with Clara, conversations, her laughter, the way her eyes would light up. He wished, more than anything, that he could go back and find the courage to tell her the truth himself. To look her in the eye and be completely honest. His hope dwindling with each visit. Clara knew he was there. She heard his knock, a gentle, hesitant sound that was so different from the confident man she thought she knew. One time, she peeked through the curtain and saw him standing there, his shoulders slumped, looking lost and alone. The sight sent a pang through her heart, but it wasn't ready. She was torn, caught in a battle between the love that still lingered and the fierce pride that demanded so. How could she open the door when the wound was still so fresh? How could she look at him without seeing the lie that had shattered her world? One evening, as she was helping her mother with dinner, Clara overheard her neighbors talking in the hallway. Their voices were low, but their words were sharp. They called Michael a rich man playing games, a wealthy heir who must have toyed with her feelings for his own amusement. Each word was like a tiny dagger, piercing her already wounded heart. He didn't interrupt, didn't make excuses. He just sat there, his own eyes filled with a deep, sincere regret. When she finished, her voice trembling, he apologized. It wasn't the polished apology of a CEO, but the raw, heartfelt plea of a man who knew he had made a terrible mistake. He told her he understood, if she couldn't forgive him, that he was ready to walk away from his family, his company, his inheritance, everything, if it meant he had even a small chance to earn back her trust. It would be a long, difficult road. But she also knew that a love like this, a connection so real, didn't come around twice. The distance between them was still there, a wide, uncertain space. But in that quiet hospital hallway, a small bridge had begun to form, fragile and unsteady, but undeniable. After that night in the hospital, my life with Michael began to shift in ways I never expected. The cold, impenetrable fortress I'd built around my heart started to show cracks. Not because of some grand, sweeping gesture, but because of the small, almost unnoticeable changes in him. The distant, untouchable CEO I once knew was gone. In his place was a man who was patient, gentle, and quietly persistent. He visited me not as a powerful tycoon bestowing favors, but as someone who genuinely wanted to weave himself into the fabric of my simple life. He started showing up, not with extravagant gifts or promises of a luxurious future, but with his time. He'd help me carry groceries up the stairs, his sleeves rolled up, a stark contrast to the perfectly tailored suits I was used to seeing him in. He brought medicine for my mother, not with a flourish, but quietly leaving it on the counter, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He just wanted to help, without any expectation of praise or thanks. Nights became my favorite. While I hunched over my textbooks, trying to absorb endless pages of information for my exams, he would sit with me. He wouldn't distract me, he'd just be there. A quiet, reassuring presence in the small space of my apartment. Sometimes, he'd offer a piece of advice on a difficult concept, his business acumen surprisingly useful in the most unexpected ways. Other times, he'd just make me a cup of tea and tell me to take a break. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to see it. Michael's love wasn't about what he could buy or who he could command, it was about respect. It was about seeing me, really seeing me, and wanting to understand my world. It was about the quiet care that spoke louder than any diamond necklace ever could. But even as this new reality unfolded before me, the ghosts of the past weren't so easily banished. Old wounds throbbed with a familiar ache. The sting of betrayal, The memory of that lie that had shattered my trust into a million pieces, it was a scar in my heart, and I wasn't ready to pretend it wasn't there. Then came a rainy evening, the kind where the city seems to hush, wrapped in a blanket of gray. Michael called and asked me to meet him at a small park near my home. My stomach twisted with apprehension. What now? Another grand apology? Another attempt to win me over with something I didn't want? I went anyway, my steps hesitant, my umbrella a flimsy shield against more than just the rain. And there he was, standing under the dim, fuzzy glow of a street lamp, not in a power suit, but in a simple sweater, looking nervous. He didn't have flowers. He didn't have a gift box. He just had himself. When I reached him, he didn't rush his words. He spoke softly, his voice barely rising above the gentle patter of the rain. He told me he understood. He understood if I couldn't forgive him. Not right away, maybe not ever, but he needed me to know that his feelings, the core of what he felt for me, had never, ever been a lie. He looked me straight in the eye and admitted it was a mistake, hiding who he was. A terrible, stupid mistake that he regretted every single day. He said he fell in love with me, not just for my kindness or my strength, but because being with me made him a better person. He said I showed him a side of life he had forgotten, a world where integrity and simple joys mattered more than stock prices and board meetings. Tears pricked my eyes, blurring the streetlights into shimmering stars. They weren't just tears for the beauty of his confession, but for a dawning realization. Love wasn't about perfect people with perfect lives. It was about courage. The courage to be vulnerable, to admit you were wrong, and to fight for something real, even when it's hard. In the weeks that followed, Michael didn't let up. He didn't just say the words, he lived them. He continued to prove his love through 100 small, consistent actions. He saw me struggling with bills and, without making me feel small, found a way to help. Framing it as an advance on a freelance project he needed my help with. He listened intently as I talked about my dreams of opening a small community library, not dismissing it as a silly fantasy, but encouraging me, helping me draft a real plan. He even started cooking with me, our small kitchen filled with laughter as we fumbled through recipes, creating simple, imperfect meals together. Slowly, brick by brick, I began to dismantle the walls I had so carefully constructed. I started to laugh freely in his presence, again, a sound I thought I had lost. I shared stories from my childhood, the silly, embarrassing ones I kept locked away. I let him see the fears I tried so hard to hide, my anxieties about the future, my insecurities, and he didn't flinch. He just listened. He held my hand, and in that shared vulnerability, our love found new, stronger ground to grow on. Nurtured by honesty, not by grand gestures or money. One afternoon, he surprised me. He led me up a series of winding staircases to a tiny rooftop garden he'd rented in a nearby building. It wasn't glamorous or expensive. It was just a small, quiet patch of green overlooking the sprawling city with a couple of mismatched chairs and pots of blooming flowers. It was perfect. As we stood there, watching the city breathe below us, he took my hand. He told me I had nothing to fear. He wanted to build a life with me, a real life where honesty and care were the foundation, not titles or bank accounts. I looked into his eyes, and all I saw was warmth and truth. The truth I had been so desperately searching for. In that moment, I realized that true love isn't about finding a flawless person or having a perfect story. It's about two imperfect people choosing each other, over and over again, despite their fears, their doubts, and their past mistakes. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a genuine smile spread across my face. It wasn't a mask, it wasn't a pretense. It was real. I felt my heart, which had been clenched so tightly in fear, finally, completely, open up to him. Standing there under the soft city lights, as a light rain began to fall around us, I knew forgiveness had begun. And love, the real, unwavering kind, was finally taking root between us. The bridge connecting our two very different worlds was no longer fragile. It was being rebuilt, stronger than before, one small act of care, one sincere word, and one shared, quiet moment at a time. The days that followed were filled with a quiet, steady rhythm of love, trust, and understanding between Clara and Michael. Gone were the misunderstandings, the fear, and the distance that had kept them apart. It was as if a storm had finally passed, leaving behind clear skies and a sense of calm they had both desperately craved. They spent time together without the need for grand gestures or the attention of anyone else. It was just two hearts learning to beat as one. Michael continued to support Clara in every way he could, but he was careful never to make her feel like she owed him anything. His support was a gift, not a loan. This honesty, this quiet respect, mattered more to her than all the money in the world. It was a language of love she understood deeply. In turn, Clara allowed herself to lean on him, to finally lower her defenses. She shared her fears, her dreams, and even her most hidden insecurities, knowing with a certainty that warmed her from the inside out that he would never judge or abandon her. He was her safe harbor. One sunny weekend, Michael surprised Clara. He didn't take her to a five-star restaurant or a lavish party. Instead, he drove her to a small, quiet cafe just outside the city. It was nothing fancy, just a simple place with sunlight streaming through the large windows and the rich, comforting smell of fresh coffee filling the air. It was perfect. They found a cozy table by the window, sipping their drinks and watching people pass by on the street, each with their own story. In that simple, unhurried moment, Clara felt a pure, uncomplicated happiness she had never known before. It wasn't tied to wealth or status. It was a happiness that came from simply being present with someone she loved. Michael turned to her, his gaze so full of a gentle softness that it made her heart race. "I want us to start fresh," he said, his voice low and sincere. "No more secrets, no more pretending. Just you, me, and everything we choose to build together. From this moment on." Clara nodded, her vision blurring as tears welled up in her eyes. But this time, they were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of relief, of overwhelming joy, of a love that had been through the fire and had survived every test. She reached across the table, took his hand in hers, and whispered, "I trust you, Micah, and I love you, not because of what you have, but because of who you are." From that day forward, their love didn't just continue. It blossomed, growing stronger and deeper with each passing day. It was a love built on the solid bedrock of patience, mutual respect, and an unwavering, unconditional support for one another. Michael began to introduce Clara to his world, but he did it slowly, thoughtfully. He showed her the softer side of wealth and influence of charities he supported, the artists he championed, the quiet good he did behind the scenes. He made sure that his world never overshadowed their bond, that she always felt like his partner, not an accessory. In return, Clara brought a richness to Michael's life that he never knew was missing. She taught him that life is, true wealth, isn't measured in stock portfolios or bank accounts, but in small, precious moments. The joy of a shared, spontaneous laugh, the warmth of a kind word given freely, the profound connection that comes from hearts that are open to love without any conditions. She showed him how to find beauty in the ordinary, and he cherished every lesson. As the months passed, they faced challenges, as every couple inevitably does. There were small misunderstandings that needed talking through, unsolicited opinions from friends and family, and the unexpected difficulties that life has a habit of throwing your way. But each time they hit a bump in the road, they returned to the foundation of trust they had so carefully built together. They talked, they listened, and they always faced the problem as a team. Their bond didn't just withstand these tests. It was fortified by them. One crisp autumn evening, as they walked down a quiet, tree-lined street under the soft, romantic glow of the city lights, Michael suddenly stopped. He turned to face her, his eyes shining with an emotion so powerful it took her breath away. Then, right there on the sidewalk, he knelt down before Clara. He held out a simple, elegant ring, its single stone sparkling like a captured star. He didn't make a grand speech. He just looked into her eyes and asked, "Clara, will you be my partner, not just in love, but in life?" She laughed through a fresh wave of happy tears, her heart feeling so full it might just burst. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes." It wasn't a yes born of expectation or pressure. It was a yes that came from the deepest part of her soul, because her heart had known this was right all along. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it felt like it had always belonged there. They held each other close, a long, silent embrace under the city lights, feeling the warmth of a love that had been tested by secrets, doubt, and fear, but had emerged stronger, purer, and more resilient because of it. In that moment, Clara knew she was no longer the poor girl living in the shadows of a millionaire's world. She was a woman, loved and respected for exactly who she was. And Michael, holding her in his arms, realized with absolute clarity that his greatest achievement was not his business empire or his immense wealth, but the incredible, hard-won love he had earned from Clara's heart. Together, they began a new chapter. It was a story built not on fairy tales, but on honesty, courage, and true devotion. They knew their journey wouldn't always be easy, but they also knew that no lie, no misunderstanding, and no obstacle could ever break what they had found together. Their story was no longer about who they were on the outside, about their different backgrounds or the world's perception of them. It was about the undeniable truth and profound strength of the love they shared, a love that had transformed both of them forever and promised a lifetime of happiness, laughter, and shared dreams. Their love was real, it was earned, and it was theirs forever.